Hi, I'm Sarah Brown, the Director of the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. Today, the budget team will be walking you through the Governor's executive budget, including an overview of the economy, how we're addressing revenue shortfalls, and executive funding initiatives. Nowhere is it more apparent that our state is ascending than in the unprecedented strength of Arizona's job market and the record investment in our economy. Under Governor Hobbs' leadership, Arizona's economy has outperformed the U.S. and many other states, growing at a faster pace than the nation as a whole, attracting both people and businesses, and employing more Arizonans than at any point in our state's history. The governor's budget prioritizes the financial health of the state, solving projected revenue shortfalls without dipping into the rainy day fund, while also making critical investments in ensuring the success of Arizonans. Governor Hobbs' fiscal year 25 budget includes investments in housing affordability, programs that bring greater accountability to government spending, child care affordability, securing our border, initiatives that help Arizonans save money, and more, all while spending less.
Hi, I'm Zach Milne, economist and budget analyst with OSPB, and I'm here to talk about the U.S. and Arizona economy. After a strong 2021, falling net exports and declining private domestic investment driven by sharp declines in residential investment led to relatively tepid growth in U.S. real GDP through the second quarter of 2023. However, GDP rebounded in quarter three with an impressive 4.9% annualized growth as domestic investment recovered with growth above 10% for the quarter. In alignment with experts at the national level, the executive expects growth to taper off in 2024 before rebounding in 2025 as the full effects of recent interest rate hikes continue to permeate through the economy. In stark contrast to GDP growth, the U.S. labor market has consistently exceeded expectations. Since July of 2020, the U.S. labor market has added, on average, nearly 500,000 jobs per month, dwarfing the 2010 to 2019 average of only 167,000 per month. Despite slowing slightly in 2023, this momentum has largely continued with the most recent jobs report showing an additional 216,000 jobs added in the month of December alone. No other economic story has gripped the headlines more in the last few years than inflation. By the summer of 2022, inflation had peaked at 9%, representing the highest inflation rate in over 40 years. In an attempt to curb the rapid increases in prices, the Federal Reserve set out on a path of interest rate hikes, bringing the effective federal funds rate from a low of 0.08% in February of 2022 to 5.3% in just 18 months. While inflation has cooled in 2023, latest data available still shows inflation as represented by both the Consumer Price Index and Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, with the latter being the Fed's preferred inflation metric, still above the 2% target. Moving forward, the Federal Reserve is anticipated to halt any further rate increases and may look to reducing rates in 2024, depending on the future trajectory of inflation in the labor market. When we shift focus beyond the national environment, it's abundantly clear that the Arizona economy is excelling above its peers. The Grand Canyon state has consistently outperformed the nation as a whole and most other states in metrics such as GDP, employment, personal income, and net migration. For instance, the Arizona economy has grown faster than that of the U.S. every year since 2019, and comparisons to other states tells the same story. In the 5-year period ending in the third quarter of 2023, the Arizona economy grew 19.6%, making it the fourth fastest growing economy of all states. The employment picture in Arizona is just as positive. The chart detailed on this slide shows total non-farm employment as a percentage of pre-pandemic levels for both the U.S. and Arizona, with the red dashed 100% line indicating employment levels from February of 2020, which was just before the COVID recession. From this, we can see that the Arizona labor market both withstood the pressures of the COVID recession better than the U.S. and recovered out of that recession faster. Indeed, by September of 2021, just 17 months after the job losses experienced in the recession, Arizona had recovered all of its jobs lost during that time. It would take an additional 9 months, however, for the U.S. to do the same, by which point employment in Arizona was already 3% higher than it had been prior to the pandemic. Currently, the Arizona economy has 6% more jobs than it did at that time, which is double the 3% growth experienced by the nation as a whole. As with GDP, the employment picture for Arizona continues when we look at all states together. When comparing states based on the growth above their pre-pandemic levels, as indicated in the chart here, Arizona ranks 8th amongst all 50 states. This success story, the one described in the previous slides, makes perfect sense when you consider the degree to which Arizona continues to attract both people and businesses. Arizona ranked 8th in total population growth between 2020 and 2022, driven in part by impressive net migration figures. In that same period, Arizona ranked 4th among all states in total net migration of people into the state. Additionally, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Arizona ranked 9th in net firm migration in 2021. It's clear that there is significant momentum behind our state, but economic headwinds are projected for the future. Forecasters across the nation expect sluggish growth in 2024, with some suggesting upwards of a 50% probability of recession in the next 12 months. While it remains to be seen whether recession fears will come to fruition the next year, the executive contemplates slower than average growth for the year. The executive budget contemplates lower spending in 2024 due to a combination of supplemental spending changes and revisions to FY 2024 and other appropriations. As with the 2024 enacted budget, fiscal year 2025 spending is anticipated to fall before resuming modest growth after the budget window. Lastly, in addition to new executive spending, baseline changes, and caseload adjustments, the 2025 through 2027 spending represented here includes additional appropriation revisions and other items intended to alleviate general fund deficits, which we'll discuss further on in the presentation. The executive's revenue estimates, which take into account the current and future economic environment, as well as the year-to-date revenue losses experienced thus far, means that without action, the state would be faced with crippling deficits of nearly $500 million beginning in the current fiscal year. However, the fiscal year 2025 executive budget takes steps to ensure Arizona's budget remains balanced. Through a combination of appropriation revisions and other recovery measures, the executive budget turns $500 million projected deficit into $500 million surplus in 2024 and ensures the state's general fund remains solvent through the entire budget window. Not only does the executive budget solve projected shortfalls, but it does so while not touching a cent in the state's rainy day fund, maintaining Arizona's fiscal strength for years to come. As of January 2024, the rainy day fund holds a record balance of nearly $1.5 billion, or roughly 9.5% of anticipated general fund revenues. This balance helps to ensure that the state's future will not be compromised by unforeseen revenue declines in future years.
Hello, my name is Tyler Hagedorn, a budget analyst at OSPB. The executive's approach to resolving the fiscal 2024 and 2025 deficit is measured, comprehensive, and diverse. It prioritizes the financial health of the state, ensures recovery options are spread across multiple sectors, and ensures the critical needs across the state are supported for our growing economy. The executive budget preserves local government revenue sharing agreements, formula funding, the Budget Stabilization Fund, and ongoing funding at agencies. These revenue recovery measures include $121 million one-time fiscal 2024 ex appropriations, consisting of the unexpended balance of fiscal 2024 one-time appropriations spanning 11 agencies and 26 line items. $201 million one-time ex appropriations of capital and IT projects from fiscal 2022 until 2024. Unexpended balances of these appropriations, except for one where half is being ex-appropriated across 12 projects and 6 agencies. and $30.4 million in one-time prior year ex appropriations from fiscal 2016 through 2023 across 13 appropriations and 5 departments. Additionally, the executive budget proposes a 1% one-time cut to the executive and legislature in fiscal 2025. The executive budget proposes 78 funds across 44 boards and agencies, which generates additional revenue of $282 million one time to the state general fund. The methodology used for these fund transfers ensures that the funds themselves remain structurally balanced moving forwards. The executive budget also proposes to recover approximately $418.6 million in legislatively funded transportation projects through fiscal year 2021 through 2024. The executive's approach to delaying non-critical spending includes that no general fund dollars for capital or IT projects that have not already begun. Building renewal for the ADOA building system is included using only non-general fund sources and is restricted to fire and life safety needs and emergency repairs, with the exception that capital projects related to the inmate health care and federal court injunction requirements are being met.
Hi, my name is Steven Cifuentes. I'm a budget analyst with OSPB. The fentanyl epidemic is not merely a public health crisis. It poses a grave threat to public safety, especially along Arizona's southern border. In response, the executive budget allocates $15 million, 5 ongoing, 10 one-time, as a commitment to safeguard our communities. This strategic investment includes $5 million ongoing to reinforce the Department of Public Safety's local border support $5 million in ongoing funding to reinforce the Departments of Public Safety's local border support special line item. This empowers law enforcement agencies and border communities to intensify drug interdiction efforts. In addition, $1 million in one-time funding is earmarked for the department to spearhead a statewide fentanyl awareness and education campaign. $5 million in ongoing funding will go to the Department of Emergency Management Affairs to curtail drug trafficking activities throughout the state. $2 million in one-time funding will go to the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System to administer grants to behavioral healthcare providers to implement or expand existing medication-assisted treatment in rural communities. Lastly, $2 million in one-time funding will go to the Department of Health Services to distribute and equip first responders with naloxone for overdose reversals. The executive budget demonstrates a substantial commitment to both public health and safety along Arizona's southern border. The border region faces significant security and humanitarian challenges due to increased mass migration into Arizona's southern border. Over the years, the southern border has been a focal point for individuals seeking asylum and a pathway to a better life. The executive budget includes an increase of $1 million in ongoing funding from the general fund starting in fiscal year 2026 to the Department of Homeland Security for the Border Coordination Office. The office purpose is to improve support for local emergency management, law enforcement, address humanitarian issues, mitigate the impacts of mass migration and in the state's border communities, and increase collaboration between the state and local leaders. The executive budget aims to not only enhance security, but also foster a more coordinated, humanitarian, and efficient response to the dynamic situation at the border. Ensuring that every victim of crime receives the necessary support and resources, the executive budget includes a $20.7 million ongoing to backfill the Victims of Crime Act. The Victims of Crime Act has been vital for aiding those affected by crime, but funding from the federal government has decreased in recent years. This funding increase addresses critical program expenditures across 3 state agencies. $9.3 million will go to the Department of Public Safety for grants to local entities that offer services for victims of crime, $9.1 million to the Department of Economic Security to continue to provide essential services to vulnerable adults who have been a victim of crime, and lastly, $2.3 million to the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission to cover victim compensation and victim assistance program operating costs. The investments in the Department of Public Safety Operations serves to ensure that the department remains at the forefront of public safety. The key initiatives are a $7 million allocation to fully staff the Major Incident Division. To address backlogs in concealed weapons permit program, the budget includes $195,700 in 2 FTE positions. Recognizing the escalating fuel costs, the executive budget provides $2.2 million in one-time funding to cover the department's fuel expenses. These budgetary provisions are vital for strengthening the department's capabilities for addressing operational needs and maintaining efficient services. The executive budget allocates funding to the Department of Emergency and Military Affairs to reinforce its capacity to respond effectively and efficiently. The executive budget includes an increase of $462,900 in one-time funding that is designed to sustain the department's operations until pre-award expenses are reimbursed by the federal government. An additional $200,000 in one-time funding is earmarked to the executive budget to act as a state match, drawing down $9 million from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. This funding provides hazard mitigation assistance to local governments and to reduce risk from natural hazards and disasters. The executive budget includes a $300,000 deposit from the Governor's Emergency Fund into the Emergency Management Training Revolving Fund to streamline emergency management training efforts and to retain public safety instructors. Additionally, a $500,000 deposit into the Emergency Management Mutual Aid Fund is earmarked for in-state deployment of mutual aid resources. These investments position the state to effectively navigate unforeseen challenges.
Hello, my name is Caroline Dudas. I am a senior budget analyst at OSPB. In April 2023, the Inmate Healthcare Federal Court injunction ordered a set of requirements that the Department of Corrections is mandated to meet in order to bring inmate healthcare services into constitutional compliance. To fulfill these requirements, the executive budget includes an increase in funding in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 to cover healthcare contractor rate increases, salaries, benefits, and overtime for 84 state employees, medication, and healthcare infrastructure improvements in Arizona prisons. For fiscal year 2024, the executive budget includes a one-time supplemental funding increase of $74 million. With $68.8 million from the general fund and $5.2 million from departmental funds. For fiscal year 2025, the executive budget includes an ongoing funding increase of $194.6 million, with $192.8 million from the general fund and $1.8 million from departmental funds. In addition to the operating budget increase, the executive budget includes a one-time funding increase of $8.6 million, with $2.7 million from the general fund and $5.9 million from a departmental fund for capital projects. These capital projects are necessary to bring inmate healthcare services into constitutional compliance. The injunction also requires that the court evaluate security and healthcare staffing needs within state prisons, which involves the court conducting a staffing study. The staffing study remains ongoing at this time and may impact the amount of funding the department requires to bring inmate healthcare services fully in compliance. The executive budget also funds critical operational items at the Department of Corrections in fiscal year 2025. An increase in one-time funding of $55.3 million is included to ensure that private prison contracts are funded in full in the next fiscal year. Additionally, an ongoing increase of $10.6 million is included to continue one-time funding for inmate food services that was provided in fiscal year 2024. Lastly, an increase in ongoing funding is approximately $500,000 is included to cover increased wastewater service costs at the Perryville State Prison Complex. Starting January 1st, 2024, Arizona National Guard members and U.S. military reservists may be laid to rest at Arizona Veterans Memorial Cemeteries in Sierra Vista, Marana, and Camp Navajo as a result of the 2022 Federal Burial Equity for Guards and Reserves Act and Arizona Laws 2023, Chapter 205. The Arizona Veterans Memorial Cemeteries in Sierra Vista and Marana experience a labor shortfall of about 1,400 hours, which is expected to grow as a result of these new laws. The fiscal year 2025 executive budget includes an ongoing increase of $70,425 from the State Veterans Cemetery Trust Fund to enable the Department of Veterans Services to hire an additional interment caretaker. New personnel will support day-to-day operations of the cemeteries and supplant groundskeeping labor provided by the Department of Corrections and private partners. The executive budget includes an ongoing increase of $1.1 million for pay increases for Superior Court judges. This is the third year of a 3-year spending plan that began in fiscal year 2023. Also included is a $2 million ongoing increase to support licensing and maintenance costs for the new statewide case management system. This system, which replaces the 20-year-old Adult Probation Enterprise Tracking System, is a statewide case management system that holds data for probationers throughout the state, streamlining data sharing between cities, towns, and counties, as well as bringing needed improvements to security and privacy protection. An $830,000 increase to the Court-Appointed Special Advocate CASA program has been included in the executive budget as well. These monies will be used to bolster efforts to recruit more CASA volunteers. More full-time staff will be hired to train the additional volunteers, and more support will be offered as the expanded CASA team works with children. Currently, only 1 in 5 children in the welfare system has the chance to work with the CASA, and the executive budget aims to improve that number. The executive budget also includes a one-time $280,000 increase for the second year of a 3-year digital evidence software spending plan. The plan received its first year of funding in fiscal year 2024 and is planned to continue to fiscal year 2026. Lastly, Laws 2023, Chapter 162, repealed certain fees for juveniles. The passing of this law in May 2023 prohibits the courts from charging juveniles or their guardians for certain services and fees, including surcharges, assessments, court-ordered counseling, or court-ordered treatment. The executive budget includes a $250,000 one-time increase to backfill the revenue lost as a result of the repeal of juvenile monetary sanctions.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bogus, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Next, I will highlight the investments that the executive budget makes to ensure that every Arizonan can have the care they need when they need it. The executive budget includes an increase of $24.8 million across 4 agencies to strengthen the state's healthcare licensing systems. Coupled with legislative fixes, these investments will restore accountability, promote transparency, and reward quality within long-term care, sober living, and other licensed settings. First, $20 million is provided to the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, or ACCESS. Of this amount, $10 million is included to achieve targeted rate increases for specific behavioral health codes, and $10 million is included to incentivize participation in behavioral health quality improvement initiatives and activities. This funding is intended to improve quality within the behavioral health system and promote a high standard of care. Second, the executive budget includes $4.8 million for multiple licensing and long-term care initiatives at the Department of Health Services, or DHS, the Department of Economic Security, or DES, and the Department of Administration, or ADOA. Of this amount, $1.6 million is one-time. $2.2 million is provided to DHS to increase the Division of Licensing Services workforce capacity by adding 16 FTEs, including 15 compliance licensing officer positions, and covering additional legal costs. This funding will ensure that DHS is adequately staffed to inspect and investigate the growing number of healthcare institutions in Arizona. $1.4 million is provided to DHS to upgrade and cover maintenance and operations costs for the AZ Care Check portal, which is a searchable database that lists licensing history of facilities and providers. $500,000 is provided to DHS for an independent assessment of Arizona's network of services for persons with mental illness. $495,500 is provided to DES to add 3 FTE long-term care ombudsman positions and support for the volunteer ombudsman program. Increasing the number of long-term care ombudsmen in the state is expected to improve the health, welfare, and safety of long-term care facility residents. Lastly, $273,900 is provided to ADOA to add 1 FTE ombudsman position to handle complaints and grievances at the Arizona State Hospital and cover increased administrative costs associated with the transition of ombudsman to an independent entity. Next, I will talk about Medicaid caseload and other investments at Access. The COVID-19 pandemic had a significant effect on Access. Federal provisions during the pandemic greatly increased the number of Medicaid members and temporarily boosted federal matching dollars for Medicaid expenses. In exchange for the boost in federal funding, states were required to allow every member to remain enrolled, despite any change in membership eligibility. One of the biggest challenges across all states was predicting how many members would no longer be eligible for Medicaid after the pandemic. The graph on this slide demonstrates the challenge from a budget perspective. The enacted FY 2024 budget projected a large decrease in Access membership, returning close to pre-pandemic levels. The amount of funding budgeted for membership in FY 2024 is represented by the solid blue line. Actual membership data through October 2023 is represented by the solid orange line. Projected membership for the remainder of FY 2024 and FY 2025 is shown by the dashed orange line. The gap between the blue and orange line represents additional member expenses that will necessitate supplemental funding in FY 2024. The graph also shows our projected 1.08% membership growth in FY 2025. As illustrated on the previous slide, actual Access membership will exceed budgeted levels by 8.9%, which increases costs in FY 2024. However, Access is also experiencing significant savings in its fee-for-service programs due to extensive efforts to combat fraud, waste, and abuse. The net result of these factors is a supplemental increase of $26.3 million in FY 2024. This can be covered using part of the balance of the Prescription Drug Rebate Fund. For FY 2025, caseload increases result in a need of $213.1 million additional general fund dollars. The primary factors at work are making ongoing the FY 2024 impacts previously discussed, projected 3% increases in capitation rates, projected 1.0% membership growth in FY 2025, and a 1.4% decrease in Arizona's federal Medicaid match rate. There are additional investments for Access to highlight. The executive budget includes $3.4 million in one-time funding to continue a multi-year project to replace the agency's mainframe IT system. The old system relies on outdated coding language, and the system controls all agency operations, from member case management to vendor payments, so it is vital that the system is replaced in a timely manner. The executive budget also adds 202 positions to combat fraud, waste, and abuse and Access's fee-for-service programs. Through initial efforts, Access is already generating enough savings to pay for the new positions, so no additional funding is needed. The executive budget also includes $10.5 million for the state's Crisis Behavioral Health Services Network. The funding is needed following implementation of the 988 crisis phone line. Access has seen a large increase in persons seeking services who are not eligible for Medicaid. There's no federal reimbursement available for these individuals, so additional state funding is needed in order to provide services. Lastly, the executive budget includes an ongoing increase of $133,100 to make permanent the Parents as Paid Caregivers program. This program was initially funded through one-time federal pandemic relief dollars. The program covers children that are members of the Arizona Long-Term Care System, or ALTEX. Parents of the children are paid to serve as caregivers, allowing the children to receive health services at home instead of in institutional settings, which improves health outcomes. For DHS, the executive budget also includes funding for the third year of both the Arizona Nurse Education Investment Pilot Program and the Preceptor Grant Program for graduate students. These programs help to expand the capacity of nursing programs and preceptor training for graduate students seeking specific degrees in Arizona. $841,600 is also provided to add 14 FTE positions at the Arizona State Hospital that were recommended in the department's Clinical Improvement and Human Resources Plan. These additional positions will improve the quality of patient supervision and care. Lastly, $646,900 is provided to DHS for additional administrative support. The executive budget also includes notable investments at ADOA and the Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, or DIFI. $250,000 is for ADOA to conduct an actuarial study to explore including healthcare providers and direct care workers contracted with Access, DES, and/or DHS in the state health insurance plan. The executive budget also includes one-time funding for DIFI to establish a prescription drug affordability division and to hire personnel needed to fulfill the division's responsibilities, which include promoting prescription drug and overall healthcare savings for Arizonans, approving drug price increases, setting copay caps on frequently prescribed medications, and monitoring pharmacy benefit managers' compliance with applicable state laws and regulations.
The executive budget proposes to extend the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit LIHTC program by 8 years and to increase the allocation of tax credits each year from $4 million to $8 million. The LIHTC program allows qualifying residential rental property developers to claim tax credits against their income or insurance premium tax liability in equal amounts over 10 years as a way to help offset the cost and promote the development of affordable housing for low-income residents across the state. Additionally, the executive budget creates a new program at the Department of Housing known as the Arizona is Home Mortgage Assistance Program. The budget dedicates $3 million from the general fund and $10 million from the Housing Trust Fund for a total of $13 million for the new program. Arizona is Home shall provide down payment assistance and mortgage interest rate relief for qualifying households to help more residents own a home in Arizona. The executive budget also preserves critical investments made to the Department of Housing in fiscal year 2024. This includes the 4 general fund deposits totaling to $196.9 million that the Department of Housing shall grant to qualifying entities to provide a variety of housing and homelessness services to Arizona residents. Such services include transitional housing for multiple populations, including those who served in the military, mobile home relocation, extreme weather response, rapid rehousing, federal match dollars for the Housing and Health Opportunities Pilot Program, and more as seen in the presentation. These dollars are essential to improving housing affordability and addressing housing needs for all Arizona residents.
Childcare is critical to providing flexibility for families and a strong start for children. Access to childcare can have a positive impact on children's short-term outcomes, such as early cognitive skill development and school readiness, as long as long-term outcomes, such as educational attainment and employment. At a time when Arizona families are struggling with the accessibility and affordability of childcare, the executive makes a significant investment in childcare. And an investment in childcare is also an investment in Arizona's families, workforce, and economy. The executive budget includes $100 million in one-time funding from the general fund and $91 million in ongoing funding from the Child Care and Development Fund to provide additional support for DES's Child Care Assistance Program, which provides child care assistance to eligible families while they work or participate in other eligible activities such as training courses. With this funding, DES will be able to maintain a 50% high-quality enhancement rate for childcare providers, cover mandatory registration fees that are passed on to parents, and continue the childcare waitlist suspension. At the FY 2025 funding level, an average of 31,700 children are expected to be served each month. The executive budget includes several other items related to vulnerable and at-risk populations supported by DES. $4.2 million is dedicated to extend the Parents as Paid Caregivers program. This program works to improve health outcomes for minor child members of the Division of Developmental Disabilities, or DDD, in All-Tex by paying parents to serve as caregivers. $165.5 million from the general fund is included for standard caseload adjustments for DDD. This increase in funding is primarily driven by three factors. First, the executive budget assumes substantial membership growth across DDD's three populations: All-Tex, Targeted Case Management, and State Only. Second, the executive assumes a 3% increase in the capitation rate for All-Tex and Targeted Case Management. Third, the federal medical assistance percentage, or FMAP rate, is expected to decrease from 66.29% to 64.89% in the second quarter of FY 2025, which means that the federal share of these costs has decreased and Arizona must cover a higher share of the cost with state dollars. $6.6 million is included to raise provider rates for state-funded long-term care services. This special line item at DES primarily funds room and board expenses for All-Tex members. $4.4 million is dedicated to the Arizona Early Intervention Program, or AZIP, for provider rate increases. AZIP provides early intervention services that support the learning and growth of children with developmental disabilities or delays. $1.2 million will cover the third year of the group home monitoring program. Lastly, $6.4 million is dedicated to DES's Adult Protective Services Program, or APS, to maintain a 1-to-25 caseload ratio, which is considered a national best practice. The APS program has seen substantial growth over the last few years in terms of the number of reports received and cases opened, the latter of which is shown in the graph on this slide. This funding will improve the timeliness and quality of APS investigations and ensure the safety and well-being of one of the state's most vulnerable populations.
Hello, I am Elizabeth Selby, and I am a budget analyst with OSPB. The executive budget includes $20.7 million from the general fund to backfill federal funding and provide for caseload increases. $5.8 million of this funding is due to a bill the governor signed during the 2023 legislative session, Laws 2023, Chapter 177, which prohibits DCS from using the SSI and SSA benefits for children in DCS care for anything that the department would otherwise normally pay for, and requires DCS to keep the funds in trust for the children. $5 million of this amount is to backfill funding for children in foster care and congregate care, and $800,000 is for the administrative costs of holding the benefits on behalf of the children. The executive budget also includes $9.7 million to backfill a shortfall in the Congregate Group Care SLI because the Families First Prevention Services Act reduces the time children in congregate care are eligible for Title IV-E reimbursements. About $200,000 is for DCS to be able to cover permanent guardianship subsidy caseload increases. Permanent guardianship subsidies help stabilize placements after children have left DCS custody. The number of permanent guardianships has been increasing by about 3.5% per year. Finally, the executive budget includes $4.92 million to backfill a decrease in the FMAP rate. In fiscal year 25, the FMAP rate will decrease by 1.4 percentage points, which affects multiple programs at the department. The executive budget further includes $71.2 million from the general fund in fiscal year 25 and a supplemental of $36 million from the general fund in fiscal year 24. The executive budget also includes increases in expenditure authority for federal funds both in fiscal years 24 and 25. The three-year budget plan included a $2.5 million expansion for the Healthy Families Program, which the executive budget includes as an increase in expenditure authority. The Healthy Families Program is a program that has been shown to reduce incidences of child abuse and neglect by providing services designed to strengthen families during the critical first years of a child's life. The executive budget also includes $13.7 million from the general fund for kinship support services. That contract begins in February of 2024. Under this contract, providers will help support, recruit, and license kinship foster families, and offer hands-on support as well as provide aid to the kinship caregivers in navigating things like behavioral health and educational needs, connecting caregivers with community resources, trainings, and peer support groups, and providing tangible goods such as beds, clothes, and school supplies. Next, the executive budget includes funding for the shortfall in the caseworker SLI. During fiscal year 2023, the department increased the percentage of filled caseworker positions from 81% to 96%, which decreased the vacancy savings available to the department. This, combined with increasing operational costs, increased the shortfall in the caseworker SLI, which the executive budget addresses with $38.2 million in fiscal year 25 and a supplemental in fiscal year 24. DCS has also received additional federal grants, so the executive budget includes expenditure authority for DCS to spend these grants and an additional $264,000 from the general fund to draw down $1.3 million for the community-based child abuse prevention grants. Finally, the executive budget includes $16.4 million in ongoing funding and a $13.3 million supplemental for provider rate increases for supervised visitation and the Nurturing Parenting Program and Family Connections. These programs are an important part of the reunification process and ensuring the safety of children with DCS involvement.
The executive budget includes investments for K-12 education related to caseload formula funding and the Healthy School Meals Initiative discussed in a further slide. Firstly, the executive budget includes funding for the inflation adjustment as prescribed by ARS 15-901.01, which requires the base support level to be increased by 2% or the change in the GDP price deflator, whichever is less. The 2% inflation adjustment will add $98.28 to the fiscal 2024 per pupil amount of $4,914.17 for a total of $5,012.45 in fiscal 2025. The total dollar investment in accordance with the inflation adjustment is $166.2 million. Additionally, a free or reduced price lunch weight was introduced in Laws 2022, Chapter 313, Section 127 through 128 to provide aid to schools in low-income areas. The weight is applied to every school in which 50% or more of its students qualify for a free and reduced price lunch, or FERPL. The FERPL weight is set to be phased in with an additional ongoing $37 million appropriated in fiscal 2025. The executive budget also includes continuing ongoing increases for district additional assistance and charter additional assistance, as prescribed by Laws 2022, Chapter 313, Section 128, beginning in fiscal 2023. The $29 million advanced appropriation includes an ongoing increase in fiscal 2025 for additional assistance that will allow public schools to continue to procure critical educational resources. With ESA reform, discussed in more detail on the following slides, the executive budget projects an increase of 800 pre-universal students in fiscal 2025, increasing total program enrollment to over 26,000 students and total program costs by $30.5 million. In May of 2016, Arizona voters approved Proposition 123, which increased distributions from the Public Institution Permanent School Earnings Fund from 2.5% to 6.9%. The additional 4.4% authorized by Proposition 123 offsets general fund requirements for basic state aid. Distributions from the fund are made from the 5-year average of the fund's permanent monthly market values. The Permanent Land Trust Fund is expected to increase distributions in fiscal 2025 and offset general fund requirements for basic state aid by $15.5 million. The executive budget anticipates a K-12 unweighted average daily membership decrease of 0.36% in fiscal 2025. Additionally, the executive budget anticipates a K-12 weighted ADN increase of 0.14% from an estimated fiscal 2024 population of 1,537,623. The net result of the fiscal 2024 enrollment changes result in a $13.8 million ongoing increase for the state's requirement for public school basic state aid. Additionally, the executive budget provides $4.5 million ongoing general fund support for the continuation of the Arizona Healthy School Meals Program at the Arizona Department of Education, or ADE. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, total K-12 enrollment had been marginally increasing year over year, primarily due to growth in the charter school system, while district schools experienced moderate declines in enrollment. The COVID-19 pandemic resulted in steep declines in enrollment for the K-12 system in fiscal 2021, followed by a rebound in enrollment in fiscal year 2022. In fiscal 2023, K-12 enrollment trends leveled out to pre-COVID trends, with moderate district decline and slowed but moderate charter growth. From fiscal 2022 until fiscal 2023, charter school enrollment grew by over 1,000 students, while district enrollment declined by 2,000 students, resulting in a net decline of total public K-12 population of 1,000. In fiscal 2022, total K-12 enrollment inclusive of the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, or ESA, was 1,107,594. And total enrollment increased to 1,156,308 students in fiscal year 2023. This growth is due to the fiscal 2023 expansion of the ESA program to its current universal state. This expansion saw universal growth of the ESA program of over 45,000 students in fiscal 2023. Moderate district enrollment declined from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2023 of 2,000 students compared to universal ESA growth of 45,000 students suggests that a large majority of ESA students are not switching from district or charter schools. Thus, the increase in ESA costs from fiscal 2022 to 2023 is associated with ESA recipients who are generating a net new general fund cost on the state, since they have not switched from district or charter schools. In response to these trends, the executive budget implements a requirement that students receiving a voucher must have previously attended public school for at least 100 days at any point during their K-12 education, and repeals prior year eligibility for universal ESAs beginning in fiscal year 2025. The executive budget includes a decrease in ongoing funding for basic state aid costs related to ESA reform, achieving an anticipated general fund savings of $244.3 million. This estimate is calculated using the fiscal 2024 enacted budget estimate of 49,500 ESA students with no public history or prior history in public school enrollment. Without ESA reform, the executive budget projects an increase of 9,400 students in fiscal 2025, increasing total program enrollment to over 83,000 students and total program cost by $822 million. Additionally, the executive budget repeals the student tuition organization income tax credits that fund scholarships for students to attend private schools located in Arizona beginning in tax year 2025. General fund savings from this reform are forecasted at $185 million beginning in fiscal year 2026 and $230 million in fiscal year 2027 and beyond. The executive budget includes an increase in ongoing funding of $4.5 million to the Arizona Department of Education to offer free school meals to students who are eligible for reduced priced meals by covering the copays that otherwise would be charged to low-income families. Eliminating this copay barrier will benefit low-income families and increase access to healthy meals for some of the most vulnerable students in Arizona by providing approximately 1.5 million additional meals. This investment targets low-income families in Arizona who do not qualify for free meals and meet 131% to 185% of the federal poverty level. The executive budget includes $250,000 from the Department of Administration to conduct an actuarial study to explore including educators and school personnel in the state health insurance plan, in conjunction with the actuarial study mentioned previously in the healthcare access slides. The total investment is $500,000. With regard to school facilities, the School Facilities Division at the Department of Administration has two primary programs: construction of new school facilities and building renewal at existing facilities. The executive budget includes $183.3 million for building renewal projects at school facilities, in addition to baseline funding for this purpose. That brings the total building renewal funding to $200 million. The executive budget includes $148 million to fund new school construction. This includes $70.1 million for 5 schools to begin construction in fiscal year 2025, as well as land and site condition projects. Additionally, the budget provides $77.9 million for 7 schools that began construction in fiscal year 2024, and will be the second and final year of construction in fiscal year 2025.
The executive budget introduces targeted investments aimed at promoting equitable access to higher education and improving the quality of post-secondary education in rural communities and empowering universities to better prepare Arizona's workforce for the demands of an evolving economy. As part of the $202.3 million higher education investment, of the total, $40 million will go to the Arizona Promise program. This program focuses on providing tuition scholarships to economically disadvantaged students who have graduated from an Arizona high school with at least a 2.5 GPA. $30 million is designated for the Arizona Teachers Academy through the border regions. This ensures the Academy's ability to consistently provide scholarships, reinforcing its commitment to the development of skilled educators and the enhancement of teaching quality. To rapidly expand Arizona's healthcare workforce, the executive budget dedicates $46 million to AZ Healthy Tomorrow. This will address the increasing demand for healthcare professionals, contributing to the overall improvement of the state's healthcare landscape. Furthermore, the executive budget includes supplemental funding for the 10 rural college districts, community college districts, ongoing funding for STEM and workforce aid, and also sustains support for equalization aid. The executive budget seeks to revolutionize healthcare education and accessibility across the state through the Arizona Healthy Tomorrow initiative. $46 million in one-time general fund support is directed towards Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, and the University of Arizona to expand Arizona's healthcare workforce. This groundbreaking initiative charts an ambitious course for the future. ASU is poised to launch a medical school emphasizing on engineering and technology. NAU will establish a community-focused school of medicine. Additionally, the University of Arizona will expand its medical schools in Tucson and Phoenix, ensuring a comprehensive and holistic medical education approach. AZ Healthy Tomorrow extends its impact beyond conventional medicine by encompassing diverse healthcare domains. Recognizing the pivotal role of infrastructure, the executive budget grants up to $1.125 million in fiscal year 2025 under the University Capital Improvement Lease to Own and Bond Fund. This represents a significant increase from $800 million, offering an additional $325 million in bonding authority. AZ Healthy Tomorrow stands as a powerful symbol for the state's unwavering dedication to advancing healthcare education. The executive budget directs $2.7 million in one-time funding to enhance the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and Blind's transportation voucher. This empowers ASDB to establish agreements with public and private providers for transportation services and for its Phoenix and Tucson day schools. Additionally, the budget allocates $168,000 from the telecommunication for the debt fund to cover contract costs for providing preschool to children with significant audio and visual impairments. Lastly, $510,000 one-time funding to meet increased costs associated with student-related services at ASDB campuses and contracted providers.
For water investments in Arizona, the executive budget includes $300,000 in ongoing funding for the maintenance and operation of 23 state-owned, continuously operating reference stations in the CORS network. The CORS network is a national network that provides enhanced location data that is precise to within a few centimeters. DWR relies on this network for groundwater and other measurements, but other entities from the federal government to private agencies also use this network. The executive budget also includes $33 million deposits into the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund in fiscal years 25, 26, and 27. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund was established in 2022 for the purpose of financing long-term water augmentation projects, the majority of which must bring in water from out of state. The executive budget also includes a $9.5 million deposit into the Water Quality Fee Fund. The Department of Environmental Quality uses this fund to ensure the cleanliness and safety of surface water, groundwater, and drinking water. The Water Quality Fee Fund has experienced an ongoing structural imbalance and has received deposits in fiscal years 23 and 24. In August of 2023, the department implemented fee increases that have slightly reduced the structural deficit. However, the fee increases alone are not sufficient to fully bring the fund into balance in fiscal year 2025. This deposit will help with that.
Hello, my name is Rudy Sen, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Regarding air quality, the executive budget includes an increase in ongoing funding to hire staff to assist in drafting state implementation plans, or SIPs, as required by the EPA. An SIP is used by a state, territory, or local air district to implement, maintain, and enforce national ambient air quality standards, and to fulfill other requirements of the Clean Air Act. The Department of Environmental Quality supports work in 17 non-attainment areas throughout the state and currently has a backlog of 7 SIPs that need to be updated to meet federal requirements. Failure to update the SIPs on time will result in federal sanctions. These sanctions include 2-for-1 offsets, loss of federal highway funding, and a promulgation of a federal implementation plan by the EPA. The graphic on the slide points to an area in the state currently receiving federal sanctions due to a failure to submit SIPs. Additional staff will address the backlog of SIPs and help prevent further sanctions from occurring. The executive budget includes an ongoing increase of $2.7 million for an increase in vehicle emissions inspections tests. The volume of tests is expected to increase by 7.5% in fiscal year 2025. Additionally, the executive budget includes a one-time $2.9 million deposit into the Voluntary Vehicle Repair and Retrofit Program Fund. This program pays up to $900 toward the cost of emissions-related vehicle repairs after a failed emissions test. Participants must meet program requirements and pay a $100 copay towards repairs. Legislative changes in 2021 increased the demand for the program. The program saw a 60% increase in participation in fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2022, and a similar increase afterward. But the revenue for the program fund is insufficient to support the increased demand. The one-time deposit will address this issue. For the Department of Agriculture, the executive budget creates a new fund that will receive the revenues from livestock inspection fees instead of the general fund, so that the department can hire additional livestock inspectors. This fund will bring the department in line with the fee-for-service model standard in Western states. The annual revenues for the fund are anticipated to be $200,000 per year, which ensure that there are a sufficient number of inspectors to meet statutory inspection requirements. For the Department of Forestry and Fire Management, the executive budget includes an ongoing $5 million transfer of appropriations from the Wildfire Mitigation Special Line Item, or SLI, to the Fire Suppression SLI. The fiscal year 2024 budget appropriated $3.2 million to the Fire Suppression SLI, but the projected funding need to fight Arizona wildfires is approximately $8 million per year. The $5 million being transferred from the Wildfire Mitigation SLI is unused funding that was appropriated for a partnership between the Department of Forestry and Fire Management and the Department of Corrections as part of the Healthy Forest Initiative. It was originally estimated that 700 inmates would participate in the program over a 2-year period. However, the actual number of participating inmates has been no more than 150. The $5 million transfer leaves $1.5 million for the program, which is sufficient for the program to continue operating at its current level and leaves room for growth. For the State Land Department, the executive budget includes $500,000 for additional positions to enhance the value of state trust land. There are 13 public entities designated as beneficiaries to receive proceeds from the lease or sale of trust land. K-12 public education is by far the largest beneficiary. When trust land is sold, receipts are deposited into the permanent fund. The Treasurer's Office manages the fund, and distributes payments from the fund to the beneficiaries. The Land Department has made strides in recent years to enhance the value and marketability of trust land, contributing to increased permanent fund receipts. Additional positions at the Land Department will continue and expand upon these efforts. In promoting Arizona's recreation and heritage, the executive budget includes $5.9 million in one-time funding to complete Phase 2 of capital improvements for the 147-year-old Yuma Territorial Prison State Historic Park for current and future generations to enjoy and visit. In addition, the executive budget includes $500,000 in one-time funding to conduct a feasibility study for a future Veterans Memorial State Park. A vital aspect of this feasibility study is to capture public comment from Arizona's veterans on the need for, design of, and location for a Veterans Memorial State Park. In addition, the study will provide cost analysis on the development of the park. Lastly, the executive budget increases the appropriation authority for the state parks store fund to meet visitor demand and needs throughout the park system stores. These items include food, camping supplies, firewood, and park memorabilia.
As mentioned previously, the executive budget uses non-general fund sources for building renewal needs in the state's building system. Building renewal projects will be restricted to addressing fire, life, and safety needs in addition to emergency repairs. Additionally, the executive budget protects funding for major statewide infrastructure efforts as followed. The I-10 expansion from Phoenix to Casa Grande, the I-17 expansion and flex lane from Anthem to Sunset Point, statewide pavement rehabilitation and preservation, state match advantage for rural transportation or SMART fund, and passenger rail between Phoenix and Tucson. In addition, the executive budget ensures that baseline highway maintenance funding needs are met with funding of $2.5 million for 84 new lane miles, South Mountain Freeway private maintenance contract adjustments, and the I-17 private maintenance contract. The executive budget includes one-time funding to address critical items such as the funding shortfall to replace 10 disrepair fueling facilities and for increased fuel costs. ADOT has fueling facilities located throughout the state that serve as the backbone to deliver construction projects, complete maintenance, respond to emergency situations, and support other entity fleet operations, such as schools and law enforcement. As seen in the most recent snowstorm, these facilities are critical to ensure that ADOT and other first responder entities can operate and respond. In addition, the executive budget includes one-time funding to meet volatile fuel costs to ensure project delivery and prevent maintenance funding for potholes and other items from being utilized to cover increased fuel costs. The executive budget includes funding for Phase 2 of replacing the 30-year-old construction management system that processes over $1.7 billion in transactions. This system is the linchpin for construction management and project delivery.
Hi, I'm Curtis Blank, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Ensuring affordable housing availability to all Arizona residents remains a priority of this administration. To address this issue, the executive budget includes multiple initiatives at the Department of Housing in fiscal 25. First, the executive budget includes a one-time $13 million investment to establish the Arizona's Home Mortgage Assistance Program to provide down payment assistance and mortgage interest rate relief for qualifying households to residents in the state. Second, the executive budget proposes that the Department of Housing, in conjunction with Access, provides $5.5 million in total state funding as federal match dollars for a pilot Housing and Health Opportunities Program, or H2O. This investment will allow the state to draw down over $104 million for a variety of housing services for Access members who are homeless or are at risk of becoming homeless. And third, the executive budget proposes that the LIHTC program is extended by 8 years and that the allocation for tax credits per year is increased from $4 million to $8 million. Extending the LIHTC program and increasing the annual tax credit allocation will allow qualifying residential rental property developers to claim tax credits against specified tax liability as a measure to offset the cost of developing affordable housing for low-income residents. As mentioned previously, in the Housing and Human Services section, an investment in childcare is an investment in Arizona's workforce and economy. Without reliable access to childcare, caregivers may miss work, skip opportunities for promotion, or leave the workforce altogether. Childcare ensures that employers have a reliable workforce and may lead to several long-term economic benefits, including higher earnings, greater tax revenues, and employment gains. The executive budget includes $100 million one-time from the general fund and $91 million in ongoing federal funding to provide additional support to DES's Child Care Assistance Program. This investment in childcare will allow new qualifying families to access child care assistance without being placed on an indefinite wait list, expand access to high-quality settings by continuing to offer special incentives to child care providers, and lower barriers to enrollment for families by continuing to waive costly or prohibitive registration fees. The executive budget also includes initiatives that are aimed towards helping Arizonans save money. The fiscal 25 executive budget includes $445,200 in one-time funding from the general fund in order to cover the startup costs for establishing the Prescription Drug Affordability Division at DIFI. The additional funding will help cover startup costs to hire personnel, including an assistant director, needed to fulfill the responsibilities of the division, such as promoting prescription drug and overall healthcare savings, approving drug price increases, setting copay caps on frequently prescribed medications, and monitoring pharmacy benefit managers' compliance with applicable state laws and regulations. The executive budget also includes $2.9 million in one-time funding in support of the VVRP and $4.5 million in ongoing funding for the general fund, from the general fund for ADE to offer free school meals to eligible students. The executive budget includes $46 million in one-time general fund allocation directed towards Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, and University of Arizona to fuel the AZ Healthy Tomorrow initiative. This initiative aims to swiftly grow the state's healthcare workforce, elevating our leadership in bioscience, life science, and research. The executive budget grants authority up to $1.1 million in fiscal 25 under the University Capital Improvement Lease-to-Own and Bond Fund. The bonds will provide Arizona universities with capital improvement funds for critical construction and deferred maintenance projects. The executive budget includes $15 million in one-time funding for the Arizona Nurse Education Investment Pilot Program. This initiative allocates funds to universities and community college districts to support the expansion of faculty members in nursing degree and certificate programs. The executive budget includes a $500,000 one-time transfer for the Preceptor Grant Program for graduate students. This program grants funds to medical professionals serving as preceptors for graduate students pursuing degrees in various healthcare fields. The executive budget includes a $15 million one-time investment and $15 million in ongoing funding for the Arizona Teachers Academy at the Arizona Board of Regents. This program provides scholarship funding and support to future Arizona educators in return for their commitment to teach in an Arizona public school. Finally, the executive budget includes a $20 million one-time investment and $20 million in ongoing funding to the AZ Promise program, which provides tuition scholarships to low-income students who have graduated from an Arizona high school with at least a 2.5 GPA.
Hello, my name is Remy Godin, and I am an analyst with the Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. The Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions is statutorily required to assess certain Arizona insurers at a rate of up to $1,050 per year for the DIFI fraud unit. The department anticipates collections of $2 million in fiscal year 2025, or $181,900 more than the fiscal year 2024 appropriation for the insurance fraud unit special line item. The executive budget includes an increase in ongoing funding from the general fund to achieve greater insurance fraud enforcement collections. The budget also contemplates $340,000 in ongoing funding from other appropriated sources to create and support a total of 4 bank examiner positions, and $116,000 in ongoing funding to maintain the Arizona Appraiser Program. The executive budget includes $1.2 million in one-time funding from the Department of Revenue's Liability Set-Off Fund for the replacement of critical IT components that reach end of life in fiscal year 2025. Replacement of these components is necessary to remain in compliance with cybersecurity protocols and requirements mandated by the U.S. Internal Revenue Service for the purpose of handling and storing taxpayer-sensitive data. The executive budget includes $6 million to enable the Secretary of State to fulfill statutory responsibilities associated with conducting primary and general elections in calendar year 2024. These responsibilities include reimbursing counties for costs of producing and mailing sample ballots to households with registered voters, reimbursing counties for costs of certifying petition and referendum signatures, printing and mailing publicity pamphlets to households with registered voters, and reviewing and processing initiative and referendum signatures. The executive budget also includes $1 million for voter education initiatives. The executive budget includes $2 million in ongoing funding to increase the lottery advertising special line item from $15.5 million to $17.5 million beginning in fiscal year 2025. The advertising SLI has remained fixed at $15.5 million since fiscal year 2011. Since that time, that level of funding, as a share of revenues, has declined sharply from 4.2% of total sales volume to below 1% of total sales volume in fiscal year 2024. Analysis suggests that the lottery could increase revenues by $6 for each additional dollar spent on advertising activities, which would in turn generate higher revenues for the state. In short, the fiscal year 2025 executive budget leaves Arizona in a stronger fiscal position than where it started. The proposed combination of baseline changes, new executive initiatives, and general fund recovery measures results in a $580 million surplus in fiscal year 2024, and leaves the state with a healthy $133.6 million ending balance in fiscal year 2025. Of the net total amount of new initiatives, only 16% represent new ongoing liabilities to the state, with one-time initiatives comprising the remaining $410 million. I now turn over to our director for closing comments.
Thank you for watching our executive budget rollout. To close out the presentation, I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to the budget, including our state agencies and many staff inside the governor's office, but most of all, the OSPB budget team.